At long last, we've come back to Hyrule for Nintendo Power 114 for November of 1998. The cover game for this issue is Ocarina of Time. The power charts are a topic of discussion in the letters column, with the question being whether to keep running the Super Nintendo list. There's a bit of a push to keep it until Ocarina comes out, so the franchise can, at least for one moment, have every spot on the list. I think it may have also had that with the Super Nintendo, Nintendo and Game Boy era, but it's good to let it have that Nintendo, give the Zelda series its chance to get the double three-peat. Double hat trick? Anyway. Speaking of which, in the power charts, it's not out yet, so Legend of Zelda only dominates the Super Nintendo, Game Boy, and Most Wanted lists on the power charts. And, well, here we go. We have our Ocarina of Time guide, walking through the start of the game up to the Temple of Time. Ocarina of Time is a game that I've played several times before, on television and on the 3DS, and I've generally enjoyed playing. There are elements of control that are a little clutchy, particularly involving ranged attacks, and there are points where the camera frustrated me, but it's fine. I think that some of the rough elements here are with the fact that we're still early in the lifespan of 3D games on consoles, and the N64 is ultimately a single-stick controller. Once a lot of the questions of how do you do movement of the character and movement of the camera in space have been answered, Zelda games become that easier to play. I've seen my dad running some difficulties with the controls on Breath of the Wild, but intuitive once you've picked up the common language of how a controller is supposed to, or at least expected to be used by designers. Do I think Ocarina of Time needs some kind of remake with modern controls? I would say no. It doesn't need it. I wouldn't be upset if it came out. Considering all the other ways to play Ocarina with great controls, again, the 3DS version, I'd say it's part of the course of Nintendo reinventing some of their older titles by modernizing some control aspects of the game and implementing quality of life improvements while keeping the title true to the original spirit of the source material, like with the Link's Awakening remake. We get a preview of Rogue Squadron, looking at the game's alpha version. Next game of the issue is Buck Bumble, with notes on the levels and the weapons. Now, Buck Bumble is coming from the developer of Star Fox, and you can see some of the DNA in there, but it's not quite executed as well. This is a game which, like some of the combat flight games I've played on the N64, has some elements of mission design inspired by the Strike series of games from EA. But the controls feel that they are, well, more Star Fox inspired, with both precise aiming, like what you'd kind of expect with a Strike, but without lock-on mechanics. It makes for something that's a bit of a mess to control. It's not terrible, but it feels like it's trying to bite off more than you can chew. In classified information, we have some codes for NFL Blitz. We have continued guide coverage for Banjo-Kazooie, which is a game I've already covered. Rockstar has another N64 game, or I should say DMA Design has another N64 game with Body Harvest. We have maps and mission notes for the first two worlds. There is a trend I've noticed with Rockstar and their titles where before GTA 4 they do a test run of various concepts, mechanics, and tech in a non-GTA game before ultimately incorporating what they'd learned into the GTA series proper. That feels like the case with Body Harvest. This is Rockstar, effectively DMA Design here, making an open-world action exploration game with you picking up vehicles in the environment, some of which control differently and are tied to specific mission objectives, putting all that in a big 3D open-world environment, as opposed to the environment that's in Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2, particularly 1 at this point, only with pedestrians to accidentally run over. The big difference here is with Body Harvest is a much simpler world environment than the complex urban environments we run into with GTA 3, with aliens instead of cops and gangsters. Now, some of this is because of the hardware limitations of the N64. It can't handle the version of Liberty City we see in Grand Theft Auto 3, but on the other hand, this makes for an environment that allows us to, the developer, to put more focus on vehicular combat. This is all about driving around in cars and fighting aliens, to the point that being on foot is actually a bad situation, where you're both more vulnerable as vehicles will take tank damage before you take damage, and less able to manage crowds of enemies on foot, something that the game interestingly communicates in its opening cutscene. As much as I kind of wish that Rockstar would revisit some of the titles from this era of the company, of those, I think Body Harvest is the one that's perhaps more interesting for a re-examination and, if not an updating, then a revisiting in some form or another. But otherwise, ultimately this makes for an interesting curiosity. We have another platformer here with Glover. We have notes, but not maps for the early levels of the game. Glover is a novel, but not well executed platformer. The concept of playing an animated glove who navigates his way through environments, or its way, their way, through environments not only through traditional platforming, but also through riding on, bouncing, and throwing a ball through those environments is clever. The problem is, for this to work, you need to be able to easily recover your ball, either by clearly marking where the ball has gone, possibly with a pointer around the edges of the screen if the location of the ball is off camera, or if the ball has been lost, having some way for the player to reset the level quickly and simply. Unfortunately, Glover does not have that, which is a frustrating pain. It's not terrible, the controls are alright, and I appreciate the process of taking an aimed throw with the ball is pretty well done, even with a dotted line to show where the ball is going to land and its arc. It's just that the overall execution of how this was supposed to work is rather crap. Also, I swear, I heard some sound effects having been reused from Mario 64. Next is Scars, a futuristic combat racing game. The first of 3 that will come up this issue, 2 of which we're reviewing because one's a title we've already covered. This one doesn't have the same speed focus as Wipeout as F-Zero. We have notes on cars and tracks. Now, Scars uses the framework of a futuristic racing game, but the combination of powers and the animal theme of the vehicles all kind of breaks that high-tech cyberpunk illusion, and instead makes the game feel a little bit like, well, what if a kart racer listened to EDM and dropped ecstasy? It's not a bad game by any means, but it's the fact that it's easily overshadowed by the competition in the space, including other games published by Ubisoft. Time to head back to the ice in NHL 99. We have game modes, control advice, and notes on which teams rank better. NHL 99, as far as hockey games go, is fine. There are definitely some graphical hitches, even for the hardware of the time, but the controls felt generally intuitive, and while some of the shots that were taken felt a little arbitrary as they went in, the game that I played for gameplay capture for this episode, the Detroit Red Wings and their overall stats, which are fantastic, versus the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim and their overall stats, which are dire, looked and felt right. And also, like, some of the shots, honestly, like, I'm impressed with how they looked right when they went in. Even when they went in through, say, triple coverage. Like, it looked like the puck arced properly. I doubt that they're animating the puck as a 3D object using actual calculated physics. Again, this is a bit early for that. Well, more than a bit early for that. But it had that nice touch to it. Is the game great? Probably not. It's probably not even the best hockey game on the N64. But I enjoyed what I played, and if I got this in a N64 grab bag at a convention, I'd be down to play a few games of this. Next, the Game Boy Color is coming, and we have an article on what it can do. This gets into specifications. I get pretty far into the weeds of that for Nintendo Power, and which buttons trigger which color combinations for when you're powering up the game. We have a preview of the soon-to-be infamous Superman the Animated Series, or as it becomes more well-known, Superman 64. Now, the current coverage is glowing, but this may be because, we're cutting it some slack since this is an alpha version of the game. This is an alpha version of the game, right, guys? Right? We'll see if that changes with the finished version. Now, Fighting Force got a preview last issue. This issue, the full game is getting coverage, and we have move lists for the 4 playable characters and notes on stages. Fighting Force is a pretty basic brawler, and one which I think lacks a few useful features that a lot of other games that have come to emulate the genre have used later. Stuff like using shoulder or Y buttons to sidestep, for example. It also doesn't have any way to block. This doesn't help other game using the center grip button, when in this case I feel like using the steering wheel grip, the side-to-side grip, with the D-pad being used for movement, would probably actually allow for better control options for the player. Now I'm curious to hunt down and try the PS1 version of the game to see if the better array of buttons on the PS1 controller makes the game more playable. And we have expanded coverage of Wipeout 64, which I have already reviewed. In Counselor's Corner, we have tips for Mission Impossible and Quest 64. And our last futuristic racing game of the issue is Extreme G2, making for the third and final one. We have a rundown of the vehicles in the game. Extreme G2 is an interesting addition to the genre. On the one hand, it has a sense that, well, doing the thing that other games do later by putting acceleration on a trigger. Particularly the Z trigger. The problem is that the Z trigger doesn't have the same level of quite the analog granularity that later controllers would have, which doesn't make it work quite as well, or I'd say which the later versions would make it work better for controlling a racing game, because it gives you that analog, the variability of a pedal. Otherwise, it plays as an excellent first part of the genre, and I'm very glad I spent some time with it, and I'd honestly say this would make a good multiplayer addition to your game library. I'm now playing of some games that haven't gotten full coverage yet, like Turok 2, Dual Heroes, and Frogger for the N64. And in Pak Watch, we have a preview of the expansion pack for the N64. My pick for this issue is, beyond a doubt, Ocarina of Time. It is one of the best games in the N64 library, with Extreme G2 being my multiplayer pick. Now, as a quick note, while I've been getting back and trying to do these episodes a month at a time, get back into that rhythm, I will have to give it up front that, well, video games, as of this point in game history, are getting a lot more complicated. Not just in the sense of number of buttons on the controller, but in the sense of mechanics, what you're doing over the course of the game, that sort of thing. So it takes more time, to a degree, to get through some of these games. Particularly with also doing for podcasts and other stuff as well. So I'm going to still try to hit that once a month, but probably going to end up slipping a few times here and there. But I'm going to try to keep on my schedule for Nintendo Power Retrospectives. But if things slip, as it did here, that's kind of why. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. And also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Tossing me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.